Time once again for a special edition of the Northern New England Chapter series of meetings. And today I have with me a very special guest and a very special member of the Northern New England Chapter. A very good friend of mine who has been a lifelong presence. We tallied up the number of years we've known each other before we got started, and we're just going to leave that out.
We don't need all those details, no.
No. My good friend Eric Poulin is here today. Eric, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Bruce. Thanks so much for having me today. Really looking forward to this chat.
Oh, this has been a long time coming. We've tried to schedule this a couple of times, and life gets in the way, you know? And,
it does.
Finally, here we are. But what I want to start out with, why don't you tell our viewers today a little bit about yourself, your baseball fandom, your SABR experience, just a little bit about how you got started.
Okay, so I grew up in a small town in Western Massachusetts, Easthampton, Massachusetts, which Bruce may be familiar with, having spent his childhood in that community as well. Basically grew up very much in a sports and baseball household. You know, it's kind of funny. I grew up in a family of athletes as sort of the non-athlete who loved baseball more than anyone else. I shouldn't say that. My father was umpire-in-chief in our county for many, many years. So baseball was just something that was always around, just a constant presence. When I was a young person, there was a AA minor league team the next town over, the Holyoke Millers, who in recent years I've done quite a bit of research on and have a couple of publications in SABR on the history of the Millers. In the early aughts, I began pursuing my master's degree in library and information science from the University of Rhode Island, and an email came out towards about halfway through my first year that the Baseball Hall of Fame, the Bart Giamatti Center for Research at the Baseball Hall of Fame was looking for interns for the summer. And I said, wow, I could be a baseball librarian. So quickly I got my act together and sent off my application, and I spent the summer of 2002 in Cooperstown. One of the greatest experiences of my life. The Frank and Peggy Steele internship program is something that I can't endorse enough for young people with an interest in nearly any aspect of the academic world. I worked in the library personally, but they do take interns in developments and marketing, just so all over the place. It's a really, really great program. And I first became a SABR member that summer, and admittedly wasn't always as active in the society as I am now. But as Bruce was joking earlier about getting older, it's funny. Sometimes the goofy things that you were talking about when you were a young person, when you hit a certain age, they start to take you seriously. And this project that we're going to be talking about today, I think, is one of those things that is, admittedly a bit of a fun project, but I also do think that it has, some pretty significant historical relevance.
That's quite a story. You talk about Cooperstown, and I like to call Cooperstown my happy place, not only because the Hall of Fame is there and it's baseball wall to wall, but the experience of that small town. Now, I live in a small town in New Hampshire up here in New London, but Cooperstown is even smaller. And you can walk Main Street in Cooperstown on the off season and walk into exactly no people as you move along. And that's one of my favorite things about it, is seeing the transformation depending upon the time of year that I go. Thinking back to when you were there, what were some of your favorite things about Cooperstown, and what made you enjoy it so much?
Well, honestly, and I acknowledged this at the time, that in order to get to the library, you have to walk directly through the plaque gallery. And probably about halfway through that summer, I just looked around and I was like, good Lord, this is what I get to do. I'm getting academic credit and a stipend to be here at the Hall of Fame, surrounded by all of this greatness. So just that fact alone was more or less like a pinch me experience. I think this is kind of an interesting story. So a researcher that lives or lived at the time, I'm not certain if he's still there in Cooperstown, is a guy named Peter Nash, who has published quite a bit of baseball history over the years. However, I was familiar with his work going by the name Prime Minister Pete Nice in the hip hop act Third Base, who kind of with the Beastie Boys were, one of the first, white hip hop acts to really gain very big mainstream success and also critical reception. And I never actually had the chance to meet Peter that summer, but I went back home and probably about 2 years later. My first job was as a librarian at a boarding school in my town. And for their major U.S. history project, junior year history project, there were a couple of students who were writing about the history of hip hop and its impact on American culture. And I said, well, heck, I'm a degree or two separated from one of the pioneers. So I called up my friend Tim Wiles, who was the longtime director of research at the Baseball Hall of Fame, wonderful, wonderful guy. And I asked him if he could possibly connect me with Peter, and he did. And so we did an interview with, it was 3 students over the phone with Peter Nash. His wife was due to give birth to their first child later that week, and he was kind enough to take time out of his schedule to meet with some high school kids in Massachusetts. So that also really sort of made me recognize the connections that are made in a small town like Cooperstown, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is, and how just really kind of supportive, for the most part, people in the baseball community and the baseball research and history community are and historically have been. So that's a story that I've always sort of been really, proud of, and I really admire Peter for taking that time. Even though it might have been a very small thing for him, it was a very, very significant thing for myself and my students.
That's really neat. But I'm jealous that you're hobnobbing with all these really cool, these really cool acts. I mean, look at me. I mean, that's pretty awesome, actually.
It was the summer that Ozzie Smith was being inducted, and I did have the opportunity to say hello to him very, very briefly once. He was on a tour with the upper administration of the Hall of Fame, but he came into the library, said hello, introduced himself to me. Had to pretend that, oh, hello, Mr. Smith. Like, I'm not, totally in awe right now at this moment. Had to kind of play it cool because we're professionals. But I believe Lou Brock also was toward the Hall of Fame that summer. And actually so it's funny, one person who was there who I missed, I was working in a different part of the museum, who came in just to look at some old pictures, was Ryan Dern, old relief pitcher for the Yankees, who had the Coke bottle glasses and threw really hard and would always throw a warm-up pitch, very, very wild to intimidate the batters. And a couple of old timers in my life who were Yankee fans were big fans of his, and I wish that I had the opportunity just to say, hello, Mr. Dern. Thank you for the work you did, and people that I care about really admire you. So that was a missed opportunity, unfortunately. But
that's neat stuff.
The fact that all these people were so kind of close. So the other 2 experiences, and we're going to talk about Cooperstown a lot, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
The other 2 experiences that I had on the working side was I had one of my tasks for the summer was to catalog a original set of scrapbooks that were donated by the family of Babe Ruth that had just come into the Hall of Fame. As it was 2002, and the so-called curse of the Bambino had not yet been broken, I felt that was my personal role in potentially breaking the curse. I did find a quote from Babe Ruth in one of those scrapbooks where he said it was his last time playing in Boston, and when he was with the Yankees, it was before he went to the Braves, where he was quoted as saying, "Boston was, is, and always shall be the greatest baseball town on earth." So I pulled that quote out, and I believe it was Gordon Eads actually featured that quote in a column that he wrote that week, and gave me credit for it. The other thing that happened that summer is we received a huge donation of boxes from the old offices of the National League, And the task that all the interns were given is that if anyone could actually find the Curt Flood letter, because it's been missing forever, that basically, we'd have a pizza party or something like that. Never found it. Did the best I could, but still missing, I believe.
Only copies are out there.
Right.
Yeah, only copies. You're a Red Sox fan.
Indeed.
How did you get to be a Red Sox fan? Tell us about your fandom from your youth.
Oh boy. I guess I'm old enough to still remember the painful years, the misery years of the Red Sox. So it's an entirely different fan experience now than it was as a young person. Following the Red Sox around here was like breathing air or drinking water. It was just literally what you did. My father actually, growing up, was not a Red Sox fan. He was a Boston Braves fan. And he still followed the Braves after they moved to Milwaukee and then later Atlanta. But he adopted the Red Sox the Red Sox when the Braves moved. So when he passed away, I would always joke like, yeah, my dad was only a Red Sox fan for 50 years. So he was a short timer. So it was part of it's part of the territory. I can remember my first time going to Fenway Park like it was yesterday. Everyone talks about how green it is when you first walk up that runway and how the green explodes just all over the place. Paul Molitor hit a home run on the first pitch in that I ever saw from off of John Tudor. Put it over the monster. A number of Hall of Famers played in that game. So Molitor, Yount, Don Sutton was the starting pitcher for Milwaukee that day. It was Carly Yastrzemski's final season, and Yaz hit a home run, one of his last home runs of his career. To be able to experience that as a young person, the first game that you went to, there's literally no turning back at that point. You're hooked for life. God, I love the Red Sox.
You and I had a pretty similar experience with our first game. My first game was actually in September of 1975 against the same club, Milwaukee Brewers. And something happened that day that only happened once in the history of Major League Baseball.
Okay.
Henry Aaron hit a home run at Fenway Park.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's amazing.
So my dad insisted on taking me to this game. I was a half pint sitting in the back of the car saying, we're going to a game. Okay, this is going to be great. Not realizing what was going to happen. And one of the fun stories about that day that came out afterwards was Bill Lee gave up the home run. And at the end of the season, when Aaron signed again with the Brewers for one more year, Bill Lee was allegedly, and I'm not sure if it's true or not, he was quoted as being angry that Aaron was returning because he wanted to be the guy that said, yeah, I gave up Aaron's last home run. I'm sure it was all tongue in cheek, but it's kind of a fun story.
Knowing Bill Lee, that checks out. That
probably does. Yeah. He lives up here somewhere and is at this point in his life not exactly the most public figure.
Yeah.
I know he had the heart trouble a little while ago. He's doing really well. I don't know if he's doing much more with the Savannah Bananas, but
yeah, I think he was down there at the start of the season for maybe a game or two, but I think it was literally just a symbolic showing, I guess, that he's still battling. One of my all-time favorite quotes in the game of baseball was before Game 7 of that 1975 World Series when Sparky Anderson said something along the lines of, win or lose, I know my starting pitcher is going to the Hall of Fame. And Bill Lee, who was starting for the Red Sox, said, win or lose, I know I'm going to the Elliott Lounge.
Remember that, yes.
Classic Bill Lee.
One of the smartest guys in all of Major League Baseball, too.
Oh, sure.
Just such baseball insight, knowledge of history, knowledge of the game around the globe.
So he actually played a charity exhibition softball game here in Easthampton, probably in the mid-90s. It was a charity game. He had Bill Lee's Traveling All-Stars or something along those lines. I forget what they were actually called. And they played a game against the town's police officers and firefighters. literally just a slow pitch softball fun event. And so Lee's on the base paths, and a bang bang play happens, and he gets called out at second base by Eddie Piziak, who was the longtime Easthampton Parks and Recreation Department director. Eddie calls him out, and Bill gets up and he's got fire coming out of his eyes. He's like such a competitor. Like it seemed like he couldn't, he barked at Eddie and rah rah, like all upset. Like even in such like a low stakes charity softball game, years and years after he retired, he wasn't gonna take what he perceived as being a bad call. It was funny. He was serious too.
Love it. Love it. That's classic Billy right there.
Oh yeah.
There you go. That's classic Billy. Let's get into the meat of the interview here and talk about the project that you've got going on. Now, you have an interest in something called found poetry.
Indeed.
Tell me about what that is.
Okay, so I was introduced to this working in a library, where found poetry is essentially you take words or phrases that currently exist somewhere out there in the world, and you refashion them into poems. So the most obvious example of found poetry is those whiteboards with the words, the magnetic poetry. It's called magnetic poetry, where it's just a whole bunch of words, and you can take the words and arrange them and write out whatever you would like. So that's considered found poetry. Blackout poetry is another form of found poetry, where you take a book or a magazine with the words that are written on the page, and you literally take a magic marker and get rid of the phrases or the words that you don't want, and you're just left with the words on the page. Poetry can really exist anywhere in any sort of context. I think that's one of the really cool and beautiful things about it. So in the mid-90s or so, a book came out. A guy named Hart Seeley, who is based in upstate New York, put out a book called "Oh Holy Cow," the selected verse of Phil Rizzuto. So essentially what he did was he would listen to Yankees broadcasts from, probably like the last 15 years or so of Rizzuto's career. And as you know, Rizzuto was often, very witty and, sometimes a little bit wacky or nutty in his calls. So he would listen to them and basically transcribe what Rizzuto would say, and using punctuation or capitalization or line breaks, he would fashion them into E. Cummings style poems. And it's really amazing. Some of the poems are really, really very funny, and others are pretty touching, actually. The most famous one was called "The Man in the Moon," which Rizzuto was talking. It was the day of Thurman Munson's funeral, and the Yankees all had to fly back from Ohio to play that night game against Baltimore. And so in the pregame, he goes on a pretty long soliloquy about how it's a beautiful full moon tonight, and just what the gravity of the moment, and just seeing the full moon and thinking of Thurman and etc. And it's really, really quite touching. There's other poems, like one was called "Time and Money," where Don Money for the Brewers was trying to call timeout in the batter's box, and the umpire didn't give him time. So time and money, two constants in the world. So that was more or less the inspiration for me to start this project. And where I began was when Jerry Remy passed away. The realization that Jerry Remy had grew up in Somerset, Massachusetts. My apologies, my cats are in a little bit of a scuffle over here. He grew up in Somerset, Massachusetts, played for the Red Sox, began as Ned Martin's color commentator pretty shortly after he retired, and he had been a part of our homes. His voice had been part of our lives here in New England for many, many years, and that void was just going to be so tremendous to so many of us. You invite a voice into your life, into your home, 162 times a year for 30 years. I mean, how can it not become just part of the fabric of who you are? So I started to sit down with old Remy calls and fashioning them into poems. Probably the most famous play-by-play call, if you could call it a play-by-play in Remy's career, was in the Patriots Day incident probably in the mid-aughts, when a foul ball goes down the third base line and one fan throws an entire slice of pizza and hits another fan with it. And listening to Don Arcillo and Remy, more or less dissect what had happened there. Here comes the pizza. The pizza would go flying. Remy in his classic Boston accent in slow motion as the pizza is flying and hitting the man. So that was really the first poem, and that kind of became the inspiration for the original project, which I was titling "Here Comes the Pizza: The Found Poetry of Gerald Peter Remy." I was very fortunate that the good folks at SABR caught wind of this and asked me if I would consider expanding it to a project of found poetry of across baseball, of baseball announcers from all teams in all cities, and to open it up to SABR members to join and participate. So I've put out a call. The call is still standing for anyone who would like to participate. I've gotten some really tremendous work back already from a number of folks, and folks who maybe hadn't considered joining SABR previously, but in order to be part of this project, they have joined, which is really pretty nice to see. And it's been a lot of fun so far.
So to reiterate, the project is called "Here Comes the Pizza: The Found Poetry of Gerald Peter Remy." That
was the original project.
Go ahead.
I'm still contemplating keeping the "Here Comes the Pizza" aspect of the title. Maybe "Here Comes the Pizza: The Found Poetry of Baseball Broadcasters Through History," something along those lines. It's a working title at this point.
So I remember that incident on television really well. About every year right around Patriots Day, you see that brought up on social media, and the video is here on YouTube, and it to this day it's hysterical to watch. And Orsillo and Remy get the giggles for, I think it was 3 or 4 innings afterwards, and they couldn't look at each other without busting out into laughter. And then somebody in the production booth would turn around and run the clip again of the pizza just going flying into it, and that was it. And I don't even remember who won the game.
Yeah, when Orsillo and Remy got the giggles, it was unstoppable. When they found something humorous together, they would it would take over the entire game. It'd be like, oh yeah, and oh by the way, it's a 3-2 pitch here, as they're laughing at whatever it was, flying pizza, or Remy had to read a press release once, or was about to read a press release, and the wind caught it and it flew out the booth and landed in the on deck circle, and they're contemplating like, hey, do we ask? I forget whoever it was. Hey, do we ask JD Drew if he could like throw it back up to us as a paper airplane or something like that? Yeah, when they found something funny, they would just go. They would go with it. It was really a lot of fun to listen to.
Well, even Jerry, prior to being coupled up with Don Orsillo, when he was Sean McDonough's number 2, and you would have the inane banter warnings. Remember the inane banter warnings that would blink? Oh, it was hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
That was good stuff. That was good stuff. Tell me how this project for you has morphed from being primarily a concentration on Jerry Remy to expanding to kind of a baseball-wide, SABR-wide project, and what you envision the final outcome to be.
So I'm in hopes. So I'm in hopes that the book will be probably about 200 poems or so. We've got a ways to go to reach that. I'm in hopes that we can have representation from all major league franchises. Obviously, the older franchises, it's a bit easier because you can take, for example, a team like the Yankees, and calls from Mel Allen or calls from Phil Rizzuto. Susan Waldman is wonderful, a fine graduate of Simmons University, where I currently am employed. So like some of the older teams, it's easier to come up with multiple announcers. Fun fact for you, Bruce, did you know that the great Jack Buck was born and raised in Holyoke, Massachusetts, just one town over here?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, Jack Buck's from Holyoke.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Now, was his son born out west in the St. Louis area, or?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the Bucks have lived in St. Louis for quite a long time. However, Paul Giamatti was born in South Hadley, which is also
Yes.
one town over, when Bart Giamatti was a professor at Mount Holyoke College. So
now we're dating ourselves.
now we're dating ourselves, yes. So anyways, back to the question at hand. Yeah, so you know, there's plenty of opportunities for SABR members to get involved with this. There's plenty of announcers from throughout history, throughout time. You know, actually, the most recent poem that I have found was actually from a newsreel from the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League. So it was an old movie newsreel, and you know, some of the language is maybe a little outdated in the newsreel, but it works as kind of a humorous poem, I guess. So yeah, you know, I'm an East Coast guy, so it's been probably a little bit easier for me to find folks who are interested and have contributed for East Coast teams. So particularly folks from the West, who, you know, if you have a favorite announcer, I'm blanking on the name of the guy who was the announcer for Seattle for so many years.
Is that Niehaus?
Yes. Someone like that would be, you know, it'd be great to have people contributing, an announcer like that. So basically, the more the merrier.
Now, this is going to be a SABR publication, correct?
It's a SABR publication right now. So tentatively, we were shooting for March or April of 2024. I think probably more realistically, it might be September or October of 2024. But it is in works. It will be a SABR book. Hopefully, you know, released next year. So
tell us what you're looking for from SABR members and submissions. Is there any special, say, team that you have a dearth of submissions for? What exactly are you looking for from SABR members for this project?
So I probably have more Yankees material than I need. No offense to the Yankees. Essentially, if you are a fan of a team like, say, the Marlins or the Diamondbacks that doesn't quite have as lengthy of a history, you're the folks that I'm really kind of looking for and looking to. So any classic play-by-play calls. It could be from rain delays. Rain delays are often sources of great passages, just as folks are trying to pass the time. I actually found a poem, a Remy poem from a rain delay, where they went to the fan mailbag and they asked him if he had a superpower, what would it be? And he basically said that he wanted to be able to travel through time, just in the sense of, okay, so if they have to fly out to Oakland for a game on the West Coast, just snap. He's in Oakland. He doesn't have to deal with the airport or anything like that. It actually ended up being kind of a neat passage. So classic calls from big moments in your team's history, those will always work very well for found poems. And just anything that you hear that sounds kind of neat or interesting, and take the words. Old games on YouTube are a great source, and many of them will have closed captioning, which it makes it very, very easy, or a good deal easier to transcribe. And then sit down and just get creative. Use different font sizes. If it's a moment that you particularly want to punctuate, a larger font or a darker font is an appropriate thing to have happen. One aspect of this too, and I realized this as I was really beginning this project. So I'm a Red Sox fan. You take a call like Vin Scully's call of Bill Buckner's error in 1986. Someone who's a Mets fan would take that exact same call, and they would fashion it as a poem of great triumph and happiness, using punctuation and exclamation points. And as a Red Sox fan, for me, it's a Shakespearean tragedy. So I actually found a poem of that call, And it ends up being very, very sad. But someone could take the exact same passage and make it something really positive and happy. So I would actually love to see if someone would contribute a poem based on that call, like as a Mets fan or someone who would find it as a moment of joy. So literally, one of the things about this project that's so neat is, like I said earlier, poetry is really everywhere. Found poetry is everywhere, and it's just up to the individual to take the words, these great play-by-play people throughout history, and kind of make them your own. They're still the words of they're still Jerry Remy's words. They're still Vin Scully's words, but to be able to fashion them and create a new meaning or interpretation of those words, I think is really something that's very, very cool.
I think this project is going to be one of the top projects of 2024 for SABR. I think it's going to be one of the most fascinating books we've done in an awfully long time. It's such a unique look at baseball that, in my opinion, really hasn't been done on much of a scale, let alone any scale, ever, at least in our lifetimes. This will be a fascinating outcome to read and experience when it hits our inboxes next year.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a very fun read. It's been a joy to be working on this, and to, like I said, add own individual spin and creativity to something that's already out there, and such a part of our lives, such a part of our baseball lives. Like I said, Jerry Remy is I consider him in an odd way almost like a family member, because he's been so present in my life for so long. So then to be able to take his work and then reinterpret it or repackage it into something new and different has really been a pretty amazing experience.
I think Jerry's looking down on you right now, and he is approving of the whole thing completely.
Awesome.
Now, you are, if I am stating this correctly, you are hosting an event back in the old hometown in December, correct?
November.
I'm sorry, yeah. November. Go ahead. Tell me about that, would you please?
Actually, no, it's not November. What is the date? I'm sorry. It's in October. It's in mid-October. My apologies.
Okay. We'll get that date. We'll put it in the comments below.
Yes.
That's how we're having calendar trouble today.
Right.
Go ahead.
So I applied for a grant through our town's cultural council, which is part of the Massachusetts Cultural Council, to do an event based on the Jerry Remy poetry, in an attempt to not only just talk about the Remy poetry, but to shed light on the concept of found poetry in general, and that it's something that really kind of anyone can do. Really try to a number of folks are familiar with found poetry, but some other folks aren't quite as familiar with what it is. And I think it's something that can be really accessible for lots of people to be involved with, to be creative with. So there's going to be an event on a Friday night in October at Luthier's Co-op in Easthampton, Massachusetts. Luthier's is a guitar shop during the day, and they have live music and poetry and spoken word and comedy in the evening. It's mostly a music venue. I'll be doing about an hour-long presentation on the found poetry of Jerry Remy, and my good friend Matt Hebert, singer-songwriter who plied his trade in Austin, Texas for many years, will be playing immediately afterwards, backed up by a fabulous band called the Lonesome Brothers. Lonesome Brothers, who were one of the finalists on National Public Radio when A Prairie Home Companion was on. They were finalists one year in the Talent from Towns Under 2000 contest. So they didn't win, but they were on Garrison Keillor's show. So they'll be playing also, and they're just wonderful and great guys and baseball fans themselves. So should be a really, really wonderful time, wonderful event, and fun. That's the other big thing that I want to stress, is that this stuff is fun. Baseball is a blast. Poetry is a blast. Let's lean into both of it, all of it. I agree.
This has been a great conversation. It's been a very interesting project to see unfold, and I am hoping that SABR members worldwide are going to get involved with this on a big level. Someone who wants to get involved on this, how do they get a hold of you?
So I can be reached. So my name is Eric Poulin. So my email address is eric.poulin@simmons.edu. Simmons like the Simmons Beauty Rest, but it's actually Simmons University. So eric.poulin@simmons.edu.
You slipped in Simmons Beauty Rest because you know I'm running a furniture store in real life, didn't you?
Well, you gotta play to your crowd, they say.
It's been a long time doing that, man. Let me tell you. They used to make those right around us in Agawam too.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Eric Poulin, a lifelong friend. Oh my God, and it's such a long life. Oh, I am so happy that we did this today. Thank you very much for doing this. Let's see how we can make this project a success for you and make this book the best that it possibly can be. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, thanks so much, Bruce. This has been a really wonderful conversation and great experience. And thanks so much for helping to promote the project.
We appreciate you coming out today, Eric. Thanks a lot. We're going to see you down the road. I want to have you do that Holyoke Millers presentation for us up here in the Northern New England chapter at some point too.
Oh, that'd be wonderful. That'd be great.
Right. Let's get everybody out of here. Thanks a lot. Have a great day. We'll see you again soon. This is Bruce McClure for the Northern New England chapter with Eric Poulin and his great new found poetry project with SABR. Don't miss out. Get a hold of him today.